Yeah, look, I'm okay. I've been on the phone off and on with kids, right? Because my kids, word travels fast in this day and age with technology, make sure they're okay. But I think most importantly is the outrage that I hope people feel. If this can happen to a United States senator for having the audacity to ask a question of the Secretary of Homeland Security, the same questions for and requests for information that we've had, not just the last sort of week or so of the activity in Los Angeles, but since the beginning of the administration, then just imagine what can happen to anybody in the country, for that matter.
We heard from you briefly at the press conference after you came outside of the federal building in Westwood. We've heard more extensively from Secretary Noem in the Department of Homeland Security, and I want to just tell you a little bit, because I'm sure this has been a whirlwind, about what they've been saying. Secretary Noem said that you, quote, lunged towards her at this press conference. The Department of Homeland Security said the Secret Service believed that you were an attacker. And the Department of Homeland Security called this political theater. What's your response and what's your version of what happened?
Well, first of all, that's ridiculous. It's a lie, but par for the course for this administration, right? So here's the stage. Look, I was in the federal building here in Los Angeles for a scheduled briefing. Just as when my colleagues and I had to go all the way to Guantanamo Bay to begin to get information about that facility being used as a detention facility, they've been non-responsive to requests for information. And so I had scheduled, they approved a briefing with representatives of the Northern Command in that federal building. We were there prior to the 10:30 original appointment date when we caught wind that Secretary of Homeland Security is going to be down the hall at a press conference. And our briefing was now delayed because of that press conference. So since the secretary has been non-responsive, I figured let me go over and listen to what she has to say. Maybe we can glean some information here.
Today, we witnessed one of the most disturbing images of Donald Trump's authoritarian regime I have seen so far, with the egregious and unlawful detainment of Senator Alex Padilla for simply standing up and speaking on behalf of his constituents. But it wasn't just enough for Donald Trump to violently assault this man with his masked goons. He also had to smear his name, not just with the MAGA media, but enlisting his mouthpiece and Carolyn Leavitt to do so. The statement that she made was so gross that it is now blowing up in her face after what was caught on camera is backfiring on her. But before we get into it all, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way in supporting the work that we are doing on this show. Now, before we get into Leavitt's statement, of course, Senator Booker's response as well, I want to start with Senator Alex Padilla, who just said this on MSNBC.
So let me make sure I understand that. Go ahead.
So the whole time, right? We're the whole time being escorted in this federal building by somebody from the National Guard, somebody from the FBI. I've gone through screening. This is a federal building. And so tell them, let's go listen to the press conference. They escort me over to that room. And I'm sitting in the back of the room behind the cameras, behind the reporters, listening. And at one point, it was just too much to take. Not the first, but the second attack on the political leadership of California, and this notion that Donald Trump and Kristi Noem had to come in and rescue the people of Los Angeles from Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. It was too much. And so I spoke up. I introduced myself. And said I had a question. Look, they said I wasn't wearing my pen. My polo says United States Senate. There was no threat. There was no lunging. I raised my voice to ask a question, and it took, maybe half a second before multiple agents were on me.
The video clearly shows, and you can hear on the audio, that you identify yourself as Senator Padilla. She said you barged into the room, or you basically broke into the room. I'm paraphrasing here. Just set the record straight on that.
I didn't barge into the room. As I mentioned, I was in a different conference room, a couple doors down the hall. Let it be known, I'd like to go listen to the press conference. The folks that were escorting me in the building walked me over. I didn't even open the door. The door was open for me. And I spent a few minutes in the back of the room just listening in until the rhetoric, the political rhetoric, got to be too much to take. So I spoke up.
Have you seen the video yet? Well, you can look here, Senator. Have you actually watched it yourself? When you watch this, and let's go through this together. Describe to me what you're seeing. What's happening here?
Yeah, again, well, multiple people forcibly removing from the room. I know I was trying to do two things at once, try to get my question out while trying not to lose my balance. They first asked me to, get down on my knees. Like, growing up where I grew up, you know what happens if you don't obey law enforcement. And so I began to go on my knees to the extent that they would let me, because they were literally handling me at the same time. And it went from getting on their knees to flat on the floor, which I tried, but wasn't able to easily because of the folks handling me. They put handcuffs on me. So yes, I was handcuffed.
These are FBI agents. Did they tell you who they were?
They wouldn't identify themselves. And I kept repeatedly asking themselves, why am I being detained? No answer. Why am I being detained? No answer. Why am I being detained? No answer. Then they get me back up on my feet and we start walking. Don't tell me where we're going.
You were handcuffed at this point?
Absolutely. Am I being led back outside? I don't know. Am I being taken to a cell? I don't know. They were not communicative until somebody from, I'm sure, Secretary Noem's team figured out I was who I said I was and finally said, let him go.
So they let you go. They took the handcuffs off. What happened next? There were reports that you met with Secretary Noem for 15 minutes after the press conference was over.
So this is a little surreal. So they took the handcuffs off. The person that came over said, well, if you'd like to meet with the secretary, you can do so after the press conference is over. Sure, I've been dying to get information from the department for months. I'll take this opportunity and see what I can glean. Then I was asked, but the other briefing that you're here for, the previously scheduled briefing, would you still like that briefing? Of course, that's why we came. That one never happened because the representatives from Northern Command left and again, didn't give us an excuse, so hoped for another opportunity to learn from them. Like, again, what's the mission of the National Guard here? What training have what's normally state National Guard is now federalized National Guard service women and men, if they're going to be out in communities, if they're going to be interfacing with civilians? This is not a normal job for them. And by the way, they're being taken away from other critical missions in the state of California to do this function. Now we hear the Marines are coming. For what purpose? What's the mission? What type of training preparation have they had?
Did you get answers to any of these questions?
None. And so, again, did have an opportunity to sit with the Secretary Noem for a few minutes. You think she might have started the meeting with an apology of what happened. Of course not. And so I began to ask the question I was trying to ask in the press conference. For all the touting of the Trump administration of going after violent criminals, I told her, there's no disagreement there. If that's all you were doing, there would be no debate, there would be no discussion. But what's happening in reality is far different than that, because we hear story after story after story of non-violent migrants who, many are working in very essential jobs for our economy, being rounded up, right? The cruelty with which they're doing this, the increased cruelty with which they're doing this, escalating here in Los Angeles over the course of the last week. You don't need flashbangs, when you're trying to target one person. National Guard over, not at the request of a governor. It hasn't happened since 1965. And so, of course, they're instigating, trying to create the response and a reaction from community, and will point to anything to further escalate the situation. It's wrong and it's counterproductive.
The fact that we have not seen bipartisan condemnation of this act just goes to show, if you needed any more evidence, which you shouldn't at this point, how lost and, quite frankly, gone the Republican Party is. This is not a political party. This is an authoritarian movement with a king, with a dictator, with a cult leader. He will not be our king. We are going to let him know that on his birthday, by the way. But that is what this is. To not have simple human decency to express how disappointed you were to see your colleague attacked by Donald Trump's thugs is just gross. And before we get into Carolyn Leavitt, someone who I think put that into such perfect language was Pete Buttigieg. You're going to want to check this out before we see what Leavitt said in Senator Cory Booker's response.
Hey, it's Pete. Like so many people around the country, I just saw something that made my stomach turn. Something I didn't think that I would see. even under this administration. A United States senator pushed to the ground and handcuffed after asking questions of a federal government official.
Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you let my hands go, I stand behind my back.
All right. Cool.
What are we supposed to do about that? Well, first of all, we name what just happened, which is that the Trump government has crossed one of the reddest of red lines that can exist in a free society. Any salute to the flag or talk of patriotism or American greatness is completely hollow if you do not respect the freedoms that that flag represents, the Constitution that directs the course of this country. And they've shown what they think of those freedoms and that Constitution. Now what? Well, much will depend on the courage of members of the Senate and the House, especially Republicans. This kind of thing is designed to make them more afraid. Our job as American citizens is to make sure that they realize they have more politically to lose by riding the tiger of this out-of-control administration, which will sooner or later eat them too, than going along with it. That's going to take all of us raising our voices like never before, so that something like this can never happen again.
Pete Buttigieg always knows what to say and is always able to articulate exactly how I am feeling, and I am sure you are feeling in this moment as well. But someone who is not to no surprise to us is Carolyn Leavitt, who made a disgusting statement on Twitter reacting to this as the White House was trying to cover up this attack on Senator Padilla. It is, of course, blowing up in her face. We're going to take a look at what she posted, and then we're going to see why. Carolyn Leavitt posted, Democrat Senator Alex Padilla should be ashamed of his childish behavior today. He crashed the middle of an official press conference being held by a cabinet secretary, recklessly lunged towards the podium where Secretary Noem was speaking, and then refused to leave the room and followed the directions of law enforcement officials. Now, we have seen this clip many times today, and I am disturbed to watch it again. But we know that 1, the senator did not lunge at Kristi Noem. 2, was not given any instructions by law enforcement. Instead, insisted upon his name being recognized and his actions being taken in account into advocating on behalf of his constituents as he was ripped by his shirt collar out of the room and then thrown on the ground. What Carolyn Leavitt is saying is completely not true. And what was caught on camera totally proves that out. She is a liar. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments, and until next time, I will see you soon.